Their life looked like a fairy tale, but it was a meticulously crafted hell. When she stumbled upon his dark collection, she realized she was his next target. Can she expose the monster before becoming another one of his secrets? The flashbulbs were like 100 tiny suns exploding in our faces, but Mark just smiled, his arm a possessive, yet publicly adored weight around my waist. "Sarah, darling, you look breathtaking," he murmured, his lips brushing my temple, a perfectly timed gesture for the society photographer angling for a shot. From the outside, we were the golden couple, Mark and Sarah Sterling, the epitome of success, love, and effortless grace. Our smiles were on magazine covers, our philanthropic efforts lauded, our Tudor-style home in Greenwich, the backdrop for countless envious Instagram posts. If they only knew. If they could only see beyond the curated perfection, beyond the hand-picked roses Mark always sent me, always white, never red. Red is so predictable, darling, and we are anything but. They'd see the meticulously constructed stage of our lives. Tonight was the annual Children's Foundation Gala, and Mark, as a major donor, was practically royalty. I played my part, the adoring wife, a vision in sapphire silk, my laughter tinkling at just the right moments, my hand always finding his. But beneath the designer gown, my skin prickled. His grip on my waist earlier, as we'd stepped out of the limo, had been a little too tight, his whisper a little too cold when I'd mentioned a minor detail about the evening's schedule he hadn't personally approved. "Just follow my lead, Sarah. You know I always know best." It was said with a smile, a lover's intimate aside, but it landed like a tiny shard of ice in my gut. This was our dance, the public adoration, the private diminishment. It hadn't always been this way, or maybe I'd just been too blinded by the whirlwind romance, by his charisma and the sheer force of his ambition, to see the subtle threads of control he'd started weaving from day one. Like the time he'd helped me choose my career path, gently steering me away from the demanding law degree I'd dreamed of towards art curation. "More fitting for your temperament, my love, and it won't take you away from our future family." Or the way he'd isolated me from my more outspoken friends, one by one, with quiet, concerned remarks about their negative influence, or lack of ambition. It was all done so smoothly, so lovingly, I'd barely registered the cage being built around me. Back home, the heavy oak door of our fortress clicked shut, the sound echoing in the cavernous marble foyer. The silence that followed was heavier still. Mark shed his tuxedo jacket, his movements precise, almost predatory. The charming gala host was gone, replaced by the man I was increasingly terrified of. "You seemed distracted tonight, Sarah," he said, his voice dangerously soft as he loosened his bow tie, his gaze pinning me from across the room. My heart hammered. "Distracted? No, I thought it went well. Everyone seemed to enjoy themselves. Mrs. Albright mentioned you barely spoke to her. She's a key donor, Sarah, you know that." His tone wasn't accusatory. It was worse. It was disappointed, like a teacher chiding a slow student. "I did speak with her," I protested, my voice smaller than I wanted. "We talked about her new granddaughter." He walked towards me, his footsteps unnervingly quiet on the Persian rug. "For a moment, perhaps, but your attention was elsewhere. Were you thinking about that ridiculous gallery proposal again? The one I told you was a waste of time?" My latest project, a small independent exhibition I was passionate about, had become a new battleground. He hadn't forbidden it, not outright. He never did. He just chipped away at my enthusiasm, my confidence, until I was the one to let it go. "It's not ridiculous, Mark," I said, a flicker of defiance I immediately regretted. His eyes, so admired for their warm, chocolatey depths, turned cold, flat. "Don't contradict me, Sarah. especially when you're being overly emotional about a hobby. He stopped inches from me. I could smell the expensive cologne, the faint, lingering scent of champagne, and beneath it, something metallic, like cold fury. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His disapproval was a suffocating blanket. I mumbled an apology, my gaze dropping to the intricate pattern of the rug. The fight drained out of me, as it always did. This was the hell behind our closed doors, a landscape of eggshells, of my carefully managed responses, and his ever-shifting expectations. A place where my worth was measured by my compliance. Later, as I was getting ready for bed, my hand brushed against his discarded jacket, draped over the valet stand. Something was in the pocket. Normally, I wouldn't dream of looking. Privacy, even in our twisted dynamic, felt like a line Mark would punish me severely for crossing. But tonight, a strange recklessness, born of that earlier tiny defiance, and a desperate need for something, anything to make sense, made my fingers close around a small, hard-edged notebook. It wasn't one of his usual leather-bound business journals. This was cheap, spiral-bound, the kind you'd pick up at a pharmacy. My blood ran cold. With trembling hands, I opened it. The first page wasn't writing. It was a drawing. A crude, almost childish, but unmistakably violent sketch of a woman, her face contorted in a scream, and an X mark drawn over her. My breath hitched. It wasn't me, but it could have been. And the handwriting beneath it, a single, chilling word I didn't recognize, felt like a death sentence. My fingers, numb and clumsy, fumbled to slide the cheap notebook back into Mark's jacket pocket, tucking it deep beneath his silk handkerchief. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The image of that screaming face, the brutal X, the alien word beneath it, it was seared into my mind. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old house, every rustle of leaves outside the window, sounded like a threat. Mark slept beside me, his breathing even, his handsome face relaxed, a picture of innocence. The monster was so well hidden. The next morning, I moved through our sun-drenched kitchen like an automaton, making coffee, arranging fruit on a porcelain platter, the picture of domestic bliss. But my mind was a chaotic storm. I watched Mark, really watched him, perhaps for the first time in years. The way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes when he thanked me for the coffee. The almost imperceptible tightening of his jaw when I mentioned I might visit my sister that afternoon. Every gesture, every word was now filtered through the terrifying lens of that notebook. "You're quiet today, darling," he observed, his eyes scanning my face with an intensity that made me feel transparent. "Everything all right?" "Just a little tired," I lied, forcing a smile. "Big night last night." He nodded, seemingly satisfied. But I saw a flicker of something, suspicion, in his gaze before he turned to his newspaper. The hell had a new layer now. The hell of knowing or suspecting something monstrous, and having to pretend everything was normal. I did visit my sister Claire. She was the only one I'd ever dared to hint at Mark's complexities. But even she, usually so perceptive, had trouble seeing past the sterling facade. "He's just a bit old-fashioned, Sarah, a strong personality," she'd said months ago when I'd vaguely complained about his controlling tendencies. "And he adores you, everyone can see that." This time, I was more desperate. I didn't mention the notebook. It sounded too insane, even to my own ears. But I tried to convey the oppressive atmosphere, the constant walking on eggshells. "Sarah, are you sure you're not just stressed?" Claire asked gently, her brow furrowed with concern that felt more dismissive than supportive. "Mark works so hard, you both have such a high-pressure life. Maybe you need a vacation, just the two of you." I left her house feeling more alone than ever. The perfect couple image was an impenetrable fortress, built not just by Mark, but by everyone who wanted to believe in it. My investigation, if my furtive, terrified glances and increasingly frantic internal monologues could be called that, began in earnest. The word from the notebook. I'd scribbled it down on a hidden piece of paper. Asphodel. A quick search on my phone, conducted in the locked guest bathroom, revealed it was a flower, often associated with death and the underworld in ancient myths. A bitter, metallic taste filled my mouth. Mark became more attentive, in a way that felt more like surveillance. He'd call me multiple times a day, his questions about my whereabouts too casual. He started coming home early, unannounced. One evening, I was in his home office, a room I usually avoided. "Ikatayas night in estada gedembati?" Another. The door creaked open. "Looking for something, Sarah?" His voice was soft, but it sliced through the silence like a scalpel. I froze, a letter opener I'd idly picked up clattering from my nerveless fingers onto his pristine mahogany desk. My excuse about searching for a specific charity's contact information sounded flimsy even to me. He walked slowly towards me, picked up the letter opener, and turned it over in his fingers. "You've been jumpy lately, distracted." His eyes narrowed. "Is there something you want to tell me, darling?" The air crackled with unspoken accusations. It was a threat, veiled in concern. I saw a flash of the man from the gala, the charming host. But now his smile was a rictus, his eyes cold, calculating. I felt a primal fear, an instinct to flee. But I was trapped by his gaze, by the opulent cage of our life. The breakthrough, if you could call it that, came a week later. Mark was supposedly on a 2-day business trip to Chicago. I'd felt a sliver of relief, a chance to breathe, to think. That evening, sorting through some old boxes in the attic, ostensibly looking for seasonal decorations, my hand brushed against a loose floorboard. Curiosity, now a driving, desperate force, made me pry at it. Beneath it was a small, locked metal box. My heart pounded. This was it. I remembered an old set of keys Mark kept in his desk drawer. Keys to old filing cabinets, forgotten luggage. My hands shook so violently I could barely fit the tiny key into the lock. It turned. Inside, nestled on a bed of what looked like dried, pressed asphodel flowers, were not more drawings, but photographs. Dozens of them, photos of women. Women I didn't know in various settings, some laughing, some seemingly unaware they were being photographed. And on the back of each one, in Mark's neat, precise handwriting, was a single word, a rating, like fair. Promising, or on a few, expired. Then I saw the last photo. It was of me, taken a few years ago, on our anniversary trip to Italy. I was laughing, looking up at him, my eyes full of love and trust. On the back he had written one word, perfect. And next to it, in a fresher, darker ink, was another. Almost. The room started to spin. This wasn't just about control or a hidden, violent ideation. This was a collection, a system. And I was part of it. The hell wasn't just emotional. It felt deadly. The attic air turned icy, the scent of dried asphodel flowers suddenly cloying, funereal. Almost. The word was a gunshot in the silence, an epitaph for the woman I had been. The loving wife, the perfect partner, she was a phantom, a carefully crafted illusion Mark was on the verge of discarding. My perfect life, our perfect marriage, was a gallery of his twisted obsessions, and I was the latest exhibit, about to be archived. My legs, leaden with terror, somehow carried me downstairs. The metal box felt like a block of ice in my hands. Mark was due back in the morning. The thought of his key in the lock, his unsuspecting smile as he walked in, made my stomach churn. For years I had been his puppet, dancing to the tune of his approval, shrinking under his displeasure. But the Sarah who had seen those photos, who had understood the chilling significance of asphodel and expired, was different. The fear was still there, a cold serpent coiling in my belly, but now it was mixed with a white-hot rage, a desperate will to survive. I didn't sleep. I sat in our perfectly appointed living room, the box on the coffee table, the house a silent, opulent tomb. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? That my respected philanthropic husband collected photos of women and wrote cryptic words on them? That I found a disturbing drawing? They'd think I was hysterical, a disgruntled wife. Claire's reaction echoed in my mind. No one would believe me without undeniable proof of a crime they understood. Mark had insulated himself perfectly. The first rays of dawn were painting the sky when I heard his car in the driveway. My heart leaped into my throat. This was it. There was no more time to plan, only to act. He walked in, radiating his usual confident charm, a small bouquet of white roses, of course, in his hand. "Sarah, darling, I'm home. Miss me?" His smile faltered when he saw my face, the box on the table. The air thickened, the charade instantly over. "What's this?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, gesturing to the box. He glanced at it, then back at me, his eyes unreadable for a moment. Then, the mask of concern slipped into place. "Sarah, what have you been doing? Going through my private things? That's not like you." "Isn't it?" I retorted, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Or is it just that the real me, the one you haven't managed to entirely erase, is finally clawing her way out?" I opened the box and spread the photos on the polished wood of the coffee table. The smiling faces, the unaware women, my own trusting gaze. "Who are they, Mark?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Fair? Promising? Expired? What does it mean? And asphodel, the flower of death? Is that what you planned for them? For me?" He stared at the photos, his composure finally cracking. For a fleeting second, I saw something akin to panic in his eyes, quickly masked by a sneer. "You wouldn't understand, Sarah. It's a project. A study in aesthetics, in perfection." "Perfection?" I almost screamed. "You call this perfection? This is sickness, Mark. You're a predator." "Don't be so melodramatic, Sarah," he hissed, taking a step towards me. "They were just moments, fleeting. And you—" His voice dropped, becoming almost a caress, a terrifying echo of his loving persona. "You were supposed to be the masterpiece. My perfect Sarah. But you've become flawed, inquisitive, disappointing." He picked up my photo, the one marked almost. This almost, I was hoping to rectify that. That's when I saw it. The shift in his eyes from manipulative abuser to something colder, more resolved. The rectification wouldn't be gentle. My hand closed around the only thing I'd had the foresight to grab from his desk earlier, the heavy, ornate letter opener I'd dropped in his office days before. It wasn't much, but it was cold, hard steel in my trembling grip. "I'm not one of your collectibles, Mark," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'm not a flower you can press into your scrapbook of death." He lunged then, not with the explosive rage I'd sometimes witnessed, but with a chilling, deliberate speed. His hand reached for my throat. I reacted on pure adrenaline, thrusting the letter opener forward. It connected with his outstretched arm, drawing a surprised grunt of pain from him. He stumbled back, clutching his bleeding arm, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. You bitch!" That moment, that tiny victory of self-preservation was all I needed. While he was momentarily stunned, I didn't wait. I ran. I grabbed my car keys, my purse, and fled from that house of horrors, from the man who had meticulously tried to dismantle me. The police were initially skeptical, just as I'd feared. But the wound on Mark's arm, my genuine terror and, crucially, the metal box I'd managed to grab as I fled, with its chilling contents, began to paint a different picture. The investigation was slow, agonizing. Mark, with his team of high-powered lawyers, denied everything, painting me as an unstable, vindictive spouse. The perfect couple image was a powerful shield. But the physical evidence of the box, the unsettling nature of his collection, combined with a deep dive into his computer and financial records, which revealed disturbing patterns and further obsessions, started to corroborate my story. Other women, seeing his face in the news, though carefully managed by his PR, began to come forward with their own unsettling stories of Mark Sterling's charisma and his controlling, predatory undertones. It turned out Asphodel was also the name of a private online forum he frequented, a dark corner of the internet dedicated to manipulative control tactics and objectification. There was no dramatic courtroom confession from Mark. He never admitted guilt. He was eventually charged, not with the grand, monstrous crimes my terror had envisioned, but with stalking, harassment, and several counts related to privacy violations and a few financial misdeeds that unraveled his business empire. His perfect world crumbled, not in a single explosion, but through 1,000 cuts. His reputation was irrevocably tarnished. The hell he'd curated for me, for others, finally had consequences in the light of day. As for me, I moved far away. I started therapy. The nightmares didn't vanish overnight, nor did the ingrained fear or the echoes of his gaslighting. Rebuilding myself from the ashes of Sarah Sterling, the perfect wife, was the hardest thing I'd ever done. There were days I barely recognized the woman in the mirror, her eyes shadowed with a grief and a wisdom I'd never asked for. But there was also a new strength, a resilience forged in that private hell. The world no longer looked the same. I saw the cracks in other perfect facades, the silent battles people fought behind closed doors. My art, which Mark had dismissed as a hobby, became my lifeline, my voice. I started a small gallery, showcasing raw, honest work from artists who explored the complexities of the human experience, the darkness and the light. The journey was long, and the scars remained. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I was no longer a reflection of someone else's twisted ideal. I was simply, painfully, and finally myself. The almost was gone. I was whole.